My granddaddy carved a warning into the fireplace mantel, right over the hearth. He who holds the land watches his own kin closer than his cattle. I read those words every single morning for 20 years, drinking black coffee, never really getting what the old man meant. Not until the summer of '52. The summer Elena Vasquez walked into my life and nearly burned it to the ground. I had 12,000 acres of the best cattle country in Montana, a ranch that had been in my family for 4 generations, bought with blood and held with sweat. I was 33 years old, and on paper, I was the king of Yellowstone County. But my life was an empty house, a big silent monument to dead men. Then came Elena. The church sent her. Father O'Brien said she was a good woman who'd had a bad run of luck. A farming accident, he said, left her with a limp. She showed up with one suitcase and eyes that held more secrets than the confessional booth. She was quiet, efficient, and she moved through my house like a ghost. Exactly what I wanted. A housekeeper who knew her place. For 8 months, it was perfect. And then things started to disappear. It started small. So small you'd think I was going crazy. A $20 bill from the cash box on my desk. Gone. A few cans of peaches from the pantry. Vanished. I told myself I was just absent-minded. A man with 12,000 acres has a lot on his mind, right? But then my father's old pocket watch, the one he carried through the Great War, disappeared from the kitchen counter. I found it tucked away in my bedroom dresser, like someone had picked it up and forgotten where to put it back. Or maybe, like they were testing me, seeing what I'd notice. The final straw was my mother's locket. It was the only thing of hers I truly treasured. A little silver oval with a rose carved on the front. I'd found it in an old trunk in the attic and left it on my nightstand, meaning to get it cleaned. For 3 weeks it sat there, a piece of my mother watching over me while I slept. And then one morning, it was gone. The space on the nightstand was empty, cold. I stood there staring at the dust outline where it used to be, and a cold, hard certainty settled in my gut. It wasn't me. I wasn't going crazy. I was being robbed, and there was only one other person in my house. That evening, Elena brought me my coffee on the porch, same as always. She moved with that familiar, painful limp, her left leg dragging just a little. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your coffee, Mr. Blackwood," she whispered. I just nodded, my jaw tight. I watched her, really watched her, for the first time. The way her shoulders were always hunched, like she was waiting for a storm to hit. The slight tremble in her hands as she set the cup down. Was that fear, or was it guilt? She was stealing from me, the quiet, church-going woman with the sad eyes. She was playing me for a fool. I had 37 ranch hands I could trust with a herd of prize cattle. But the woman sleeping under my own roof was a thief. Granddaddy's words echoed in my head. Watches his own kin closer than his cattle. She wasn't kin, but she was closer than any of my men. Why, though? That's the part that chewed at me. I paid her well, $300 a week, plus a private apartment over the old carriage house. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than fair. Why risk it all for a few bucks and some family trinkets? Maybe it was a test. Maybe she was seeing how much she could get away with before she went for something bigger. My safe, my property deeds, my entire life. Paranoia is a bitter pill to swallow, but in my world, it kept you alive. I decided right then, I wasn't just going to fire her, I was going to catch her. I was going to get proof so undeniable that not even Father O'Brien could defend her. I was going to set a trap, and I knew just the bait to use. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. It was simple, but it was deliberate. First, the desk drawer. I took out a fresh $50 bill, crisp from the bank. But before I put it in the drawer, I did something my father taught me. I took a pencil and made a tiny, almost invisible mark on the corner of Benjamin Franklin's eye. A mark only I would know was there. Then I placed it right on top of a stack of papers, easy to see, easy to grab. Next, the kitchen. My prize bull, Titan, had just won grand champion at the state fair. I had a picture of him in a small, heavy silver frame. I placed it on the kitchen counter, but I set it crooked, just a few degrees off center. A person in a hurry might not notice, but I would. The final piece of the trap was the most important. The bait. My father's gold-class ring from Montana State University. It was heavy, gaudy, and worth a small fortune. I took it off and left it right on the edge of the bathroom sink next to the soap. Like I'd forgotten it after washing up. An irresistible temptation for someone with sticky fingers. Then all I had to do was wait. The first day was agony. Every time Elena entered a room, I felt my muscles tense. I'd watch her dust around the desk, her cloth coming within inches of the drawer with the marked 50. I'd see her wipe down the kitchen counter, moving right past the crooked picture frame. She cleaned the bathroom, but the ring remained untouched. Nothing. The second day was the same. The money was still there. The frame was still crooked. The ring still sat by the sink, gleaming under the bathroom light. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I really was losing my mind. Maybe I'd misplaced the locket myself. Maybe I'd spent the 20 and just forgotten. My gut told me I was right. My head told me I was a paranoid fool, accusing an innocent woman. The third day, I almost called the whole thing off. I felt ashamed. Here was this poor woman, working hard for every dollar, and I was treating her like a common criminal. I went about my day, checking fences, dealing with cattle buyers, trying to push the whole ugly business out of my mind. That evening, I came in late, covered in dust and sweat. I went straight to the bathroom to wash up for dinner. I turned on the tap, reached for the soap, and froze. My blood turned to ice in my veins. The sink was spotless, wiped clean, and the ring was gone. A cold, quiet rage settled over me. It wasn't the hot, explosive kind. It was the patient, waiting kind. The kind that builds pressure until something has to break. I didn't say a word to her at dinner. I sat at the head of my long dining table, eating the meal she'd cooked, watching her limp in and out of the kitchen. She was good. I'll give her that. Her face was a perfect mask of quiet servitude, not a flicker of guilt, not a hint of triumph. But I had her now. I knew she'd taken it. The problem was I still couldn't prove it. A missing ring wasn't enough. I needed to know where she was taking these things, who she was selling them to, what her plan was. I needed to catch her red-handed. So I kept waiting, watching. My chance came 4 days later. It was a Thursday in late July, one of those brutal Montana days where the sun beats down and cooks the air right out of your lungs. The heat shimmered off the dirt, and the cattle huddled in the shade of the cottonwoods, too miserable to even flick their tails at the flies. I was in my office trying to make sense of a stack of quarterly reports when I saw her through the window. Elena. She was walking away from the house, moving with more difficulty than usual. Her limp was worse, almost a stagger. She carried a small, lumpy canvas bag. But what made me sit up straight, what made the hair on my arm stand on end, was her direction. She wasn't heading toward her apartment over the carriage house. She was heading for the main road, the long, dusty road that led to town. Where in the hell was she going on foot in this heat? And what was in that bag? I didn't even stop to think. I grabbed my truck keys from the hook by the door and slipped out the back. I got in my Ford, started it up, and pulled out onto the service road, keeping the main house between us. I circled around and got onto the county road a quarter-mile behind her, far enough back that she wouldn't hear the engine over the buzzing of the cicadas. I drove slow, letting her get a good distance ahead. She walked like a wounded animal. Every 50 yards or so, she'd have to stop, leaning against a fence post to catch her breath, her face flushed and beaded with sweat. Part of me, the decent part, wanted to pull up and offer her a ride. But the part of me that had been betrayed, the part that was now cold and hard as iron, just watched. I was a predator, stalking my prey, and I was about to follow her right back to her den. She walked for nearly a mile, a grueling, painful trek under that unforgiving sun. Finally, she turned off the main road and onto a narrow dirt track I hadn't driven down in years. It led out toward the old abandoned Copper Falls mine. This was it. I pulled my truck over behind a thicket of overgrown sagebrush, killed the engine, and got out. The heat hit me like a physical blow. I had to follow her on foot from here. I moved from cover to cover, using old rusted-out farm equipment and stands of thirsty cottonwood trees to stay out of sight. My boots crunched on the dry earth. Sweat soaked through my shirt. Up ahead, I could see the derelict buildings of the old mine, their wooden walls weathered to a silver gray, their tin roofs peeling and groaning in the slight breeze. It was a ghost town, a place for secrets. Elena wasn't heading for the main mine complex. She was heading for a single, isolated shack set off to the side. It was a miserable-looking place, with a corrugated metal roof and boards nailed over most of the windows. But there were fresh tire tracks in the dirt outside. Someone was using this place. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame. She looked back over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the empty landscape. For a second, I thought she'd seen me. I flattened myself behind a rusted ore cart, my heart hammering against my ribs. But she saw nothing. She took a deep breath, like a diver about to plunge into dark water, pushed the door open, and disappeared inside. This was my chance, the proof I needed. I crept forward, my boots silent in the thick dust. I didn't go to the door. I went to the side of the shack, to a filthy, grime-caked window that didn't have a board over it. I found a stack of old timbers and crouched behind them, positioning myself so I could hear what was happening inside. The voices drifted through the thin wooden walls, and the first words I heard made my blood run cold. It was Elena's voice, but it was different. High-pitched, strained, terrified. "I told you I can't get any more right now. He's starting to notice things are missing." A man's voice answered her. It was deep and gravelly, laced with menace. "That's not our problem, sweetheart. You knew the deal. You bring us valuables. We keep things pleasant." My mind was reeling. Our problem? We. She wasn't working alone. "Please," Elena begged, and I could hear the desperation cracking her voice. "I've given you everything I could. The money, the locket. I even got his father's ring. But I can't keep taking things. He's watching me. I know he is. My ring, my mother's locket." So she did have them. A bitter satisfaction washed over me, but it was immediately replaced by confusion. What was this? Who were these men? A second man laughed. A horrible, grating sound. "Maybe you need a little more motivation. Your legs healed up pretty good since our last conversation." My breath caught in my throat. Healed up? My God, the limp. The farming accident Father O'Brien had told me about. It was a lie. These men, had they done that to her? Elena's voice dropped to a whisper, filled with a defiant pain. "You already broke one. Isn't that enough?" The first man's voice turned hard as stone. "We'll break the other one if we have to. We'll take whatever we need to take to get what we came for. Now, have you looked for the deeds?" Deeds? It wasn't about trinkets. It wasn't about pocket money. It was about my land, my family's legacy. These thugs were using her to try and steal my entire ranch from under my feet. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They weren't just petty thieves. They were playing a much bigger, much more dangerous game. "I can't," Elena said, her voice stronger now, laced with a surprising steel. "I won't. He's been good to me. I won't betray him like that." There was a sharp, sickening smack. It echoed through the thin walls of the shack, followed by Elena's sharp cry of pain. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to kick the door in, to tear these men apart with my bare hands. But I was frozen, paralyzed by the unfolding horror. I needed to hear it all. I needed to understand. "Listen to me, you stupid girl," the first man snarled, his voice dangerously quiet. "We know you've got a little crush on your rich boss. We've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching. But those feelings are going to get you killed." Elena's reply came out as a choked sob, but her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I'd rather die than help you hurt him," the second man growled. "Wrong answer." I heard the scuff of heavy boots on the wooden floor. Then Elena screamed, a raw, piercing scream of pure agony. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of blinding physical pain. That was it. That was the breaking point. I wasn't a witness anymore. I exploded from my hiding place, rage turning my vision red at the edges. I didn't even feel the splintering wood as my shoulder slammed into the shack's flimsy door. It burst off its hinges and I stumbled into the dim, dusty interior, my fists already clenched. The scene was worse than I had imagined. Elena was on the floor, curled into a ball. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and blood trickled from a cut on her lip. Two huge, brutish men in dusty work clothes stood over her. One of them had his boot drawn back, ready to kick her again. A third man stood off to the side, watching with cold amusement. He was smaller, dressed in a clean but cheap-looking suit that was out of place in the filth of the shack. He was clearly the one in charge. They all spun around as I crashed through the door, their faces a mixture of shock and annoyance. "Well, well," the man in the suit said, a smug little smile on his face. "If it isn't the lord of the manor himself, come to check on your thieving maid?" I didn't give him the satisfaction of an answer. I launched myself at the nearest goon, the one who'd been about to kick her. He was a giant of a man with a thick beard and arms like fence posts. I drove my fist straight into his solar plexus. All the strength I'd built over a lifetime of roping cattle and bucking hay went into that one punch. The air rushed out of him in a pained grunt. He doubled over, gasping. I didn't give him a chance to recover. I brought my knee up hard into his face. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage, and he went down like a sack of grain, crashing into a stack of crates. The second thug was more prepared. He came at me swinging a heavy piece of rusted pipe. I ducked under the wild swing, the pipe whistling inches from my ear. I smelled the stale sweat and cheap whiskey on him as I came up inside his guard. I grabbed his wrist with one hand and his elbow with the other. I twisted. Hard. There was a dry snap and he howled in pain, the pipe clattering to the floor. I shoved him back and he stumbled over his fallen partner, collapsing into a heap of groaning misery. 2 down. I turned to face the man in the suit. His smug smile was gone, replaced by a look of wary disbelief. His hand was inching toward the inside of his jacket. "I wouldn't," I said, my voice a low growl. "You pull out anything other than an empty hand, and I'll make you eat it." He froze. We stood there for a long moment. The only sounds in the room, the ragged breathing of the 2 men on the floor, and Elena's quiet, desperate sobs. "This isn't over, Blackwood," the suit hissed. "You can't protect her forever." "Try me," I said, taking a step toward him. "I've got more money than God and friends in places you can't even imagine. You come near my ranch or my people again, and I'll bury you so deep your own mother won't be able to find a body to weep over." His eyes darted between me and his 2 useless henchmen. He was a coward, a bully who was only tough when he had the advantage. He knew he was outmatched. "You think you've won," he sneered, backing toward the broken doorway. "You think you know what's going on here, but you don't know the half of it. You're a fool, Blackwood, a blind fool." He paused in the doorway, a final, venomous parting shot on his lips. "Ask your precious maid about the children. Ask her about the promise your granddaddy made. Ask her who her own father was." And then he was gone, dragging his 2 broken goons with him out into the blinding sunlight. The shack was suddenly quiet, deathly quiet. Children? A promise? My grandfather? What in God's name was he talking about? I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly starting to drain away, leaving a shaky emptiness in its place. Then I turned and knelt beside Elena. She was still on the floor, her body trembling. She looked up at me, her dark eyes wide with shock, pain, and something else. Shame. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, her voice hoarse. What are you doing here?" "I followed you," I admitted, and the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Elena, I thought you were stealing from me." Fresh tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her bruised cheeks. "I was," she choked out. "I was stealing from you. I took the money. I took the ring. I took the locket. I'm so sorry." My anger was gone, evaporated. All I felt was a profound aching confusion. I gently helped her sit up. She winced, trying to keep her weight off her left leg. "Why?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Why did you do it? For them?" She nodded, her gaze fixed on the dusty floorboards. They said they'd hurt the children if I didn't." There it was again, that word. "What children, Elena?" I asked, my mind racing back to the suit's parting words. What promise did my grandfather make? Her face crumpled, and a fresh wave of sobs shook her body. I can't tell you. I've already brought so much trouble to your door. I should just go. I should disappear before they come back for me. No, I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. You're not going anywhere. You're coming back to the ranch with me, and you're going to tell me everything. From the beginning. She shook her head, a look of pure terror in her eyes. You don't understand what these men are capable of. They're not just thugs. The man in the suit, his name is Marcus Thorne. His family has a history with yours, a blood feud that goes back 50 years. They know things about your grandfather, secrets buried for decades. This isn't just about land, Mr. Blackwood. This is about revenge. A blood feud? Revenge. This was spiraling into something far darker than I could have ever imagined. I stood up and held out my hand. Then we'll face them together. I looked down at her leg, swollen and bruised. But first, we're getting you to a doctor. We'll sort the rest out later. She stared at my outstretched hand for a long moment, as if she couldn't believe it was real. Then slowly, hesitantly, she reached up and took it. Her fingers were cold and trembling in mine. I never wanted any of this, she whispered as I helped her to her feet, her weight leaning heavily against me. I was just trying to keep them safe. I know, I said, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I realized that I did. I know you were. The drive back to the ranch was thick with silence. I kept glancing over at Elena. She sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing landscape, her hands clenched in her lap. She was trying so hard to be strong, pressing her lips into a thin white line every time the truck hit a bump in the road, fighting back the pain. I got her back to the house and helped her into the downstairs guest bedroom, ignoring her weak protests that she should go to her own apartment. You're staying here, I said, where I can keep an eye on you. I called Doc Morrison in town. He was a gruff, no-nonsense man in his 60s who had delivered me and set half the bones in the county. He didn't ask questions when I told him my housekeeper had been in a serious accident. He just said he'd be there in an hour. While we waited, I sat in a chair by her bed. The lamplight softened the lines of pain on her face. She looked so young, so vulnerable. It was hard to believe this was the same woman I'd been convinced was a cold, calculating thief just a few hours ago. The men who did this to you, I said, breaking the silence. Marcus Thorne. How long has this been going on? Elena's eyes remained fixed on the ceiling. They found me about 2 weeks after I started working for you. Thorne knew who I was. He knew I'd gotten a job here. He said my family owed his family a debt, and he was here to collect. A debt? What are you talking about? He wanted me to get into your safe, she said, her voice a monotone, as if she were reciting a story about someone else. He wanted deeds, mineral rights, bank statements, information, a way to ruin you. When I refused, he showed me pictures. Pictures of what? She finally turned her head and looked at me, and her eyes were haunted. The children. I leaned forward, my hands on my knees. Elena, tell me about the children. She took a long, shaky breath. There are 6 of them. The oldest is 12. The youngest is 5. They're living in an old abandoned farmhouse on the edge of your property, the Miller place, trying to survive on their own. On their own? Where are their parents? Dead, she said flatly. Disease, accidents. The life out here is hard when you have nothing. Their parents are all gone. They have no one left. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Why are you the one looking after them? How are you connected to them? Her answer was barely a whisper. Because their great-grandfathers died protecting your great-grandfather. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. What? Your grandfather, Samuel Blackwood, she began, her voice gaining a little strength as she spoke of the past. He wasn't just a rancher. Back in the territorial days, he was a lawman. He fought rustlers, claimed jumpers, outlaw gangs. In 1898, a gang led by a man named Silas Thorne tried to take this ranch. They wanted the cattle, but mostly they wanted the land. There was a shootout, a battle really. It lasted a whole night. I'd heard stories, of course, vague family legends, but never the details. Go on. 6 of your grandfather's men died defending this place that night. They were just hired hands, but they fought and died like family. When it was over and Silas Thorne's gang was either dead or run out of the state, your grandfather gathered the families of the men he'd lost. He made them a promise, a solemn vow. He said that as long as there was a Blackwood on this ranch, the families of the men who fell would never want for anything. The double bar would always provide for them. It was all starting to click into place, a terrible 50-year-old puzzle. And these children, they're the last of them, the great-grandchildren of those men. She nodded. Their families have struggled for generations. They were proud people. They didn't like taking charity. But things got harder. And now there's just the kids left, and me. The suit's final words came back to me. Ask her who her own father was. And you, Elena? I asked softly. Whose great-granddaughter are you? A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. My great-grandfather was named Miguel Vasquez. He was the foreman. He took the bullet that was meant for your grandfather. My God. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the darkness at the land that had been paid for with the blood of her family. All this time, she hadn't just been a housekeeper. She was the keeper of a promise, a legacy I never even knew existed. Why, Elena? I turned back to her. Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you come to me and ask for help? She gave a short, bitter laugh that ended in a sob. And what would you have done, Mr. Blackwood? A strange woman shows up on your doorstep talking about century-old promises and 6 secret orphans living on your land? You already thought I was a thief. You would have thought it was some kind of elaborate scam. You would have thrown me out on my ear. She was right, and the shame of that truth cut deeper than any knife. My suspicion, my cold, cynical nature, had driven her right into the hands of my family's oldest enemy. So you stole from me, I said, piecing it together. The money, the ring, it was for them, for food, medicine. The youngest, Tommy, he's only 5. He's been sick for weeks, a terrible fever. I sold your father's ring to a pawn shop in Billings to buy him antibiotics. And your mother's locket? Her voice broke completely. I was going to sell it. I was so desperate. The oldest girl, Sarah, she needed shoes for school. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't. It's still hidden in my room. I kept looking at the picture inside, thinking about how much your mother must have loved the people in it. Something inside my chest, a wall of ice I'd been building for years, finally cracked. Elena, don't, she interrupted, holding up a hand. Don't say you understand. It won't make it better. Marcus Thorne won't give up. His great-grandfather died trying to take this land. He sees it as his birthright. He will hurt those children to get to you. He will kill them, and he will kill me. I walked back to the bed and stood over her, my shadow falling across her face. My heart was a cold, hard knot of fury. No, I said, my voice leaving no room for doubt. He won't. I looked into her eyes, and for the first time, I think she saw past the rich, suspicious rancher. She saw the grandson of Samuel Blackwood, a man whose family kept its promises. He will not touch those children, and he will not touch you. This isn't just my fight anymore, Elena. It's ours. And Marcus Thorne has no idea what he's just started. Doc Morrison arrived 20 minutes later. He took one look at Elena's leg, his face grim. After a thorough examination, he pulled me aside into the hallway. Thomas, he said, his voice low and serious, that's no farming accident. I've set enough bones to know what I'm looking at. Someone broke her leg deliberately, and whoever said it did a butcher's job of it, probably on purpose, to make sure it never healed right, to keep her in constant pain. He shook his head. This is torture, son, plain and simple. Rage, cold and pure, boiled in my veins. Can you fix it? I can try. I'll have to re-break it and set it properly. It'll mean surgery, a long and painful recovery. She'll need weeks, maybe months, of complete rest. Do it, I said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Money is no object. Doc Morrison looked me straight in the eye. It's not about the money, Thomas. It's about who did this. A man who would do this to a woman is a monster. I know, I said, my voice hard as granite, and I'm going to handle the monster. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. While Elena rested under the influence of a sedative, I went to work. I called my lawyer in Billings and told him to start digging into a man named Marcus Thorne and a land development company out of Denver. I called my banker and had him start moving significant funds into a new account. If Thorne wanted a war, I was going to make sure I had the ammunition to fight it. But my most important task couldn't be done over the phone. Before the sun was even up, I drove out to the old Miller place. Following Elena's directions, I found the dilapidated farmhouse. It was barely standing, a skeleton of a building slowly surrendering to the elements. My heart sank. How could children be living here? I pushed open the door and stepped inside, and what I saw broke me. The place was a ruin, but it was clean. 6 small makeshift beds were lined up against one wall, made from old pallets and covered with worn-out but neatly folded blankets. A crude table was built from wooden crates. On a shelf, a few tattered books were stacked next to a couple of carved wooden toys. Someone had tried, with desperate love, to make this wreck a home. And then I saw them, the children, huddled together in the far corner, their eyes wide with fear. They stared at me like a pack of frightened deer cornered by a wolf. The oldest, a girl of about 12, with Elena's same dark, serious eyes, stepped forward, putting herself between me and the younger ones. "Who are you?" she demanded, her small voice trembling but defiant. "What do you want?" I got down on one knee to make myself seem smaller, less threatening. "My name is Thomas Blackwood," I said softly. Elena works for me. She sent me." The girl's tough exterior cracked. Fear flooded her eyes. "Is she okay? The bad men? Did they hurt her again?" So they knew. They knew everything. My heart ached for them, for the terror they must have been living with every single day. "She's hurt," I said gently, "but she's going to be okay. She's with a doctor right now. He's going to fix her leg so it doesn't hurt anymore. She asked me to come and get you, to take you someplace safe." A little boy of about 5 with big brown eyes and cheeks flushed with fever started to cry. "Is she going to die, like Mama?" I felt that crack in my chest widen into a chasm. I shook my head, my own voice thick with emotion. "No, son, she's not going to die. And neither are you. I'm taking all of you home, to my home." It took time. It took every ounce of patience I had. I told them about Elena, about how brave she was. I told them I had a big house with warm beds and more food than they could ever eat. The little boy, Tommy, was burning up with fever. I knew I didn't have much time. Finally, the oldest girl, Sarah, made the decision. She looked at Tommy, then at the other frightened faces behind her, and then back at me. "Okay," she whispered, "we'll go." We packed their few, meager belongings into old pillowcases. As I led them out to my truck, I looked back at the ruined farmhouse. This wasn't just a house, it was a monument to a broken promise, a promise I was about to make whole again. I brought them back to the double bar. The old bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived in my grandfather's day hadn't been used in years, but it was big and solid. That week, while Elena was in the clinic in town recovering from her surgery, my men and I turned that bunkhouse into a home. We ran new plumbing and electricity. We bought new beds, new furniture, new clothes. We filled the pantry with food. I hired a woman from town, Maria Santos, a kind widow who had raised 5 children of her own, to be their live-in caretaker and teacher. 10 days later, I brought Elena home from the clinic. Her leg was in a heavy cast, but the doctor said the surgery had been a success. She would walk without pain for the first time in months. When she saw the bunkhouse transformed and filled with the sound of children's laughter, she broke down and cried. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of overwhelming relief. I took her to the main house and set her up in the guest room, down the hall from my own. "I can't stay here, Mr. Blackwood," she protested. "It's not proper. I'm your housekeeper." "You're not my housekeeper anymore, Elena," I told her, my voice gentle but firm. "Your family." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The children had to learn what it was like to be safe. Elena had to learn to let someone else take care of her. and I had to learn how to open a heart I'd kept locked up for years. My big, quiet house was no longer quiet. It was filled with noise, with chaos, with life. Meanwhile, my lawyer was making progress. He'd confirmed that Marcus Thorne was the great-grandson of Silas Thorne, the outlaw my grandfather had faced down. The Thornes had spent the last 50 years nursing a grudge, convinced the Blackwoods had stolen their fortune. They'd been watching my family for generations, waiting for a moment of weakness, a way in. Elena and the children were their key. My lawyer made some calls, quiet calls to powerful people. He explained in no uncertain terms what would happen if Thorne or any of his associates were ever seen in Montana again. Financial ruin, legal troubles that would follow them to their graves. The kind of problems that a lot of money and influence can create. One afternoon, about a month after the incident at the shack, a long black car I didn't recognize rolled up my driveway. Marcus Thorne got out, alone. I met him on the porch. Elena stood in the doorway behind me, her hand on my arm. "Blackwood," he said, his face a mask of controlled fury. "You've made a powerful enemy." "No," I said calmly. "You did. You came after my family. You threatened my children. You hurt a woman I care about. You thought you were dealing with some soft-handed rancher who inherited his money. But you were wrong. You were dealing with Samuel Blackwood's grandson." I let that sink in. "My grandfather made a promise to protect these families," I continued, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm honoring that promise. This land, these people, they're mine to protect. There is nothing you can do, nothing you can threaten, that will change that. So I'm going to tell you this once. Get in your car, drive away from my home, and if you ever come back to this valley, you will not leave it alive. That is not a threat, Mr. Thorne. It is a promise." He stared at me, his eyes burning with hatred. He looked past me at Elena, and then at the bunkhouse where two of the children were playing in the yard. For a moment I thought he might do something stupid, but then he saw the truth in my eyes. He saw that I was not a man to be trifled with. He saw the legacy of the man who had defeated his great-grandfather. Without another word, he turned, got back in his car, and drove away. I never saw him again. 3 months later, I was standing on that same porch watching the sunset, but I wasn't alone anymore. Elena was beside me sitting in a rocking chair, her cast finally gone, her leg healing stronger every day. The sound of the 6 children playing tag floated up from the yard, their laughter echoing in the evening air. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Taking us all in? It turned your whole life upside down." I thought about it. My quiet, orderly life was gone. My house was a mess. My bank account was significantly lighter. And my heart was fuller than I had ever imagined possible. "Never," I said, and I meant it. "My grandfather made a promise. I'm just the man lucky enough to keep it. But you taught me something, Elena." "What's that?" "That a home isn't about 4 walls and a roof. It's about the people you fill it with. For the first time in my life, this house feels like a home." She reached over and took my hand. I never thought anyone could see past the broken parts of me. "You're not broken, Elena," I said, turning to face her. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. You chose pain over betrayal. You sacrificed everything for those kids. That's not broken. That's a hero." 6 months after that, we were married at St. Mary's, with Father O'Brien officiating and a wedding party of 6 smiling, cheering children. The whole town came to the reception at the ranch. The Double Bar Ranch became more than just a business. It became a home, a sanctuary, a place where old promises were honored and new families were forged. The children grew up strong and happy, and they called me Uncle Thomas, but they called Elena Mom. Years later, people would still ask about the beautiful woman with the slight limp who was always by my side. I just smile and tell them the truth. She's the woman who taught me what my grandfather's words really meant. It's not about watching your kin for betrayal. It's about watching over them, protecting them, no matter the cost. She showed me that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't things you own, but the people you fight for. I thought I was setting a trap to catch a thief, but in the end, she's the one who caught me. She broke into the one place I thought was safe, my heart, and stole it for good. And I've never been richer. If you enjoyed this story and believe that promises are meant to be kept, do us a favor and hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the hidden corners of history and the people who live in them. We'll see you in the next one.